Welcome back to First Look. Well, it's time to act on your RSPs as the deadline to contribute is just days away. Joining me now to break down what you need to know and to give us some smart saving tips is Daniel Chometa, Community Outreach Manager for Consolidated Credit Counseling Services of Canada. That's a long title there, Daniel. Welcome and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start off. I mean, the deadline is just days away. What is the exact deadline this year?
February 29th.
All right.
So we're quite literally days away.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's get into the importance of investing in RSPs. Why is it important for us to do this?
Well, it's important to consider for retirement, for one. And this is an excellent vehicle for a retirement saving strategy. It's important to think about the implications of what can happen to our income as a result of contributing to that. So we reduce our tax burden effectively by contributing to the RRSP.
All right, so what are the different types of RSPs that we can invest in?
Well, you've got a basic RRSP that you'd go to the bank with, and you'd speak to a financial advisor there, and they'd give you a few options, and the options are a little limited. But then you can get into some more advanced kind of RRSPs, self-directed is what they call, where you'd be able to choose more investment options and things of that nature. There's obviously more risk associated with those kinds of things, and they differ by the way that you're going to pay out some fees as well. Then we also have group RRSPs, which we might find from our employer. With the employer type RRSPs, it's important to think about who's contributing to those things. So obviously you're going to be contributing, but if your employer is contributing, can you actually remove any of that money? And that's a consideration people don't make and often fall into a mistake and aren't able to pull out that money for things like a down payment for a house.
So in a situation like that, would you need to speak to your human resources department before you start investing?
Yeah. You want to speak to your HR department and find out, where those investments are, what the rules are, and even before you contribute, maybe it's not the right thing for you. Maybe you do want to do a basic or a self-directed type RRSP and leave the employer one alone.
So how do you decide what type of RSP is right for you? Because there's so many different options, as you're just mentioning right now, and for someone who may not be as up to date on all of this stuff, do they go to a financial expert or do they go to a banker? Like, who gives you this information?
I think it's important to get a couple of different opinions. Check the credit unions out, check the banks out, but definitely seek the assistance of a financial advisor. A financial advisor is not your neighbor. No matter how smart they might think that they are, it's always a better idea to check with a financial advisor and get some good sound advice.
All right, so how much can we contribute this year?
Well, that's dependent on each individual situation. So we're going to have to look at our tax return from last year, and they will give us a number of what we can contribute, what kind of contribution room we have.
But isn't there a fixed percentage that we can contribute up to for a salary?
But if we haven't contributed up until this point, then that varies accordingly.
All right, so the most important thing is a lot of people are scrounging at this time of year because they want to invest in their RSPs, but what might actually help us is some saving tips that we can be proactive about throughout the year. Do you got some that you can share with us?
Well, I mean, I talk a lot about budgeting, and that's really, I think, the number one thing that people fail to do is to understand what's going on with their behavior. Budgeting's a nice way of saying plan, or plan is a nice way of saying budgeting. But at the end of the day, it's all about behavioral change. So if we don't know what we're spending on, how can we be expected to change that behavior? Things like coffee, as an example, in the morning, tracking expenses is incredibly important.
Yeah, actually, a friend of mine was telling me if you actually write down how much you spend on coffee on a monthly and then you take it towards a year, you'd be shocked. It's thousands of dollars, right? And you could be using that money towards investing into something.
Or even paying down debt.
Right. So paying down debt is I saw the first tip up there was that's really important to pay that down. What else would you say is a good tip?
Make it automatic is another one. Most employers pay us, direct deposit these days. So if we can set it and kind of forget it, it's a good way to go. We don't have to think about the money going into a savings account. We can direct it straight into an RRSP or into a TFSA or any other savings vehicle, as long as we're putting something aside. We always hear the old adage of pay yourself first. This is a really good way to do it. Another thing I might add is that you might want to limit your ability to access your savings account. So in other words, don't allow your debit card to carry the savings account on it. Withdraw that from the debit card. So that way you have to go to the bank to take the money out physically.
So you're actually disciplining yourself.
Yeah, you're limiting your ability to access that money.
Right. Okay, so back to RSPs for just a moment. When should you start thinking about this? At what age?
As soon as possible.
So just when you get out of university and you get your first job, start thinking about it, start investing right away?
The sooner the better. The sooner the better. And I mean, looking at compounding interest, we know that the more time you have money in an investment, the more money you're going to make. Money makes money. So therefore, the sooner we can get involved, the better it is.
All right. Thanks for that, Daniel. Appreciate you coming on. And everyone, don't forget, the deadline is literally just a couple of days away. And that wraps up our show for this morning. Make sure you join us tomorrow for your first look at the biggest Canadian and international headlines.